So the last thing we're going to talk about now related to Dorian are the minor pentatonic scales that exist within the key. So a minor pentatonic scale is the intervals 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. Some people call that a blues scale. You'll hear me refer to it as a blues scale frequently. There are people out there who consider the blues scale those intervals that I just stated, but with the inclusion of the sharp 4, flat 5 interval, right? So if you're playing a minor pentatonic, pentatonic means 5 notes, and those were 5 notes. That sharp 4, flat 5 is very often used in this scale, but it's a passing tone. It is not a scale tone. So you can certainly use that, but we're not going to talk about that right now. It's really a separate issue. But some people refer to the inclusion of that as a blues scale and a minor pentatonic as just those 5 notes. So refer to it any way you would like, but you'll hear me using both terms. Okay, so intervals 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. I'm going to hold up this diagram of the key again. And I want you to look at all 7 of those scales up there. I've got the minor pentatonic intervals down on the bottom, just to remind you. 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. Which scales do you see those intervals appear in? Now we should basically already know that they occur within the A Dorian scale. So I see 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7 there. But I see it in 2 other scales. I see those intervals from the B Phrygian scale, which means from a B root you could play the same fingerings that make up the A blues scale starting from a B, and it does come from the B Phrygian scale. And I see another one from the E Aeolian scale. I see 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7 coming from that scale as well. Now, even though those come from different scales initially, what we're going to do is take those ideas, and what I mean by idea is we're going to play those scales over A minor. The only time that you're really going to hear a minor pentatonic scale, a blues scale, is when you play the A blues scale over the A minor. If you were to play B blues, you will be playing notes out of the Dorian scale, which I'll show you in a little more detail in a minute. But it's not going to sound anything like the minor pentatonic that you're used to hearing. But that's a good thing, because it's going to give it a different sound. And so is it going to give us a different sound when we play the notes that make up E blues. All right, so let me flip to another page. We've got 3 blues scales or minor pentatonic scales within the key, but we're going to relate them to the Dorian scale. And once again, in the book, these are all done nicely, but I just scratched this out. So A Dorian up at the top in 2 octaves to make our demonstration a little bit more clear. So what you see are the intervals for the Dorian scale on the very top, the names of the notes underneath, because it might help us a little bit to use names of notes somewhat in this discussion to make it a little more clear. So underneath the A Dorian scale, you see I've listed the 3 blues scales, A blues, B blues, and E blues. Okay, and alongside of each of those, the names of the notes and the intervals that those are from the Dorian scale above. So again, we already know when you play A blues, which are the notes A, C, D, E, and G, you're going to get the intervals 1, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. And that will definitely sound like a blues scale over that A minor chord. If you go underneath to the next one, B blues, the names of the notes in the B blues scale are B, D, E, F sharp, and A. And again, those are notes right out of the Dorian scale, but they are the intervals from the Dorian scale 2, 4, 5, 6, and 1. So it's not going to sound like what you're used to, but again, that's a positive thing. If we look underneath that, E blues, the notes E, G, A, B, and D are going to give us the intervals from the Dorian scale 5, flat 7, 1, 2, and 4. Again, a different set of intervals is going to create a different sound within the Dorian scale. These are very useful ideas for soloing, mainly because the pentatonic fingering positions are so familiar to everybody. They're kind of quick and easy to use. Okay, then you see underneath that, it says the balance of tone center and colors. And this is really what's important in terms of our discussion right now, is to understand this concept. So when you play A blues, you're playing all 4 of the tone center intervals. Remember, tone center intervals in any scale are always the strongest sounding intervals. So you see all 4 of them in the A blues scale with the one color, which is 4. So it's a very strong sound over A minor, which is why you hear rock and blues players using this idea constantly. It's a very strong sound, and that's what they're looking for. If you look at the B blues scale underneath, what you have in parenthesis, just the 5 and the 1 are in the tone center of the Dorian scale when you play B blues. And you have all 3 colors. So it's out of balance in terms of tone center and colors. There are more colors than tone center. What that means is over the A minor chord, you're going to get a weaker sound. It's the weakest of the 3 ideas that we're looking at. Now, weak doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just means that it's more removed from the sound of the chord. But it's an option. You want to sound more removed from the chord? There's a great idea. Play B blues. Okay, if we look at the E blues, we're kind of in the middle. It's less strong than the A blues, but stronger than the B blues. And this is a very commonly used idea. Sometimes you hear it in rock, but I would say mostly in jazz. Certainly if you listen to easy listening jazz, they use this all the time because it's got a nice sound to it, somewhat of a color sound, not quite as strong as the obvious blues scale. As obvious as the A blues would sound. So E blues is in the middle somewhere, and it's a nice sound. So the balance is 3 tone center and 2 colors. So I will demonstrate these things, but then it's going to be up to you to use these 3 ideas. I'm not going to go through all the fingerings. I think everybody out there should be able to find the fingerings for these things. These pentatonic positions are all over the place on the internet. So if you know how to play A blues, then move everything up 2 frets. And you're going to find B blues, etc. So the thing to do would be work out the fingerings for all 3 of those blues scales, but practice them one at a time. So what I'll do is demonstrate A blues to hear that obvious sound that we all know, and then I'll go to E blues because it's the next most strong sound, and then finally I'll go to B blues. So there's a lot of stuff that can be played just using these 3 blues scale ideas. All right, so let me demonstrate that a little bit. I'm not going to do long demonstrations here, just enough to give you the idea. So A blues. Very strong sound. If I change to E blues, now you hear that 9 that we've practiced before, right? So when you play this E blues ideas, that 9 is really going to stand out. And the B blues. Listen to how distant this sounds from the chord. Almost sounds like you shouldn't play it, but not quite. These ideas that have more colors than tone centers and sound more removed from a chord, personally I like to use them sparingly, but I do use them. So what I'll do is start on A blues, I'll move to B blues and then back to the A blues because that gives me a stronger sound. So here's A blues and you'll hear the change. So right at the end there you heard me come back to A blues. You can do anything you want with these things. You can stay on B blues all day long if that's what you like the sound of, but that's just a suggestion of a way maybe to use that idea. So a lot going on with just those 3 blues scales. Spend as much time as you can on that. Let me recap kind of what we've got so far, ideas that you're working on and listening to with this A Dorian scale. Later on, much later on, we're going to come back and there's going to be even more stuff to do with this. But right now, what we've talked about so far is getting good at soloing with the tone center, and then individually adding your 2 up and down the neck, adding your 4 up and down the neck, adding your 6 up and down the neck, and then kind of mixing all that stuff together any way you see fit. And now we've got these 3 blues scale ideas that you can mess with. So between all of that, there's a lot to do with this Dorian scale. Spend as much time as you need to on this before you go to the next scale. What I will say is you've done most of the hard work already. This is the process that I have students go through to learn a scale. There are 100 things that you could practice with any scale, and they're probably all good and legitimate, but the ones that we've just gone through are the ones that I consider to be the most important to get a student to have a very good working knowledge of a scale, and also a little bit of knowledge, more knowledge of the key, because we use those 3 different blues scale ideas that came from 3 individual scales initially. Okay, so it's a lot to work on there, but like I said, you've got most of the hard work done, because when we go do the next scale, it's going to be the same process, and you're going to find it much easier and much quicker to get through.